to importunate presenters like me. I ask because in today's Thinking Aloud I meet the author of Everyone Is Not Doing It, a book which persuasively argues that, in a world of almost unlimited choice, what we refuse to do may say more about us than what we do. That's in 15 minutes. And Alan, no need to say another word.
It's gone quiet, hasn't it? Here are a few words to gladden anyone's heart. This is BBC Radio 4. Now, helping to celebrate the life and work of a great physicist with wild hair, Relatively Einstein presents writer Terry Pratchett and mathematician Ian Stewart conjuring up the magic of science. Or is it the other way round?
At the far end of real science, you find magic, because it becomes magic by just about anybody's standards. Magic is probably just science that you don't fully understand yet. You could go back with a certain amount of gadgetry to 500 years ago, and in the few hours before you were burned as a witch, you could really impress people. So much of what we take for granted every day is completely magical a few hundred years ago. In fact, for 50 years ago. This is something that I sometimes shout from the rooftops. We live in a science fiction universe and we don't understand it. Nearly all of us now carry a little mobile device which will enable us to talk to anyone, anywhere else in the world that has a device like it without having to think about it. For a very small amount of money, you can go into a shop and buy a device which lets you see where you are anywhere in the world. You don't have to be lost anymore. Well, you can be lost, but at least you'll know exactly where you are lost. And we just take these things and we use them, and in the case of the mobile phones, we get little sparkly covers, and we forget that this is absolutely, completely and utterly science fiction. I have quite a lot of readers who have some technical background, and I have an awful lot of readers who, like me, struggle to keep afloat in the tide of science. Isaac Newton said he was like a child standing on the seashore, and playing with the pebbles, with the whole ocean of the universe in front of him. Well, I've got the bucket and spade a bit further along. We're just happy to stay on the beach. But we're all of us out there trying to get to grips with this stuff. And what Discworld can do is introduce scientific ideas and speculations in a new guise, in a new way. And people find that funny, and I think they should. I'm not poking fun at science. I'm a believer in it. I think without it, we'd all be blundering around in the dark, quite genuinely. G.K. Chesterton made a point when he said that the role of fantasy is to pick up that which is everyday and commonplace and therefore unregarded, and turn it around and show it to us from a new direction, so that once again we see it for the first time. And one of the things I think I have to do in the books is tell people how amazingly interesting the commonplace is, because the commonplace is not really very commonplace. Stars are nothing particularly wonderful. They're quite easily made out of glowing matter by completely unskilled energy. And there are billions of them. I mean, you just trip over the thing. Electric light bulbs are intensely rare. There's probably only a few billion of them in the entire universe. And they were actually made by monkeys. They fell out of the tree, and it took hundreds of thousands of years to get it together to understand the universe enough, and to understand about metals, and to understand about electricity, and build all this stuff. And then they developed the light bulb. And now we think a light bulb is everyday and normal. It is astonishingly rare. We ought to put one of them in the museum.
Discworld is flat. It's supported by 4 giant elephants on the back of an enormous turtle who swims through space. You've got to have elephants to hold it up, and you've got to have turtles to hold up the elephant, but turtles naturally swim through space, so you don't need anything to hold up a turtle. But an elephant that swam through space would be completely stupid. I'm Ian Stewart, Professor of Mathematics at Warwick University and also a science writer. One of the better-known books that I've done is a series of Science of Discworld books written jointly with Terry Pratchett and a biologist friend of mine called Jack Cohen. Discworld is a fantasy world in which magic works and where everything runs on the power of story and things happen because people want them to. Very different from our own universe in which things happen because the laws of physics say that they must. And in our Science of Discworld books, we compare and contrast these two different ways of thinking about the world.
The universe, they said, depended for its operation on the balance of 4 forces, identified as charm, persuasion, uncertainty, and bloody-mindedness. Thus it was that the sun and moon orbited the disk because they were persuaded not to fall down, but didn't actually fly away because of uncertainty. Charm allowed trees to grow, and bloody-mindedness kept them up.
The light fantastic.
It's a parody of Discworld. In our Science of Discworld books, Discworld events parody certain views of the scientific world.
A university is very much like a coral reef. It provides calm waters and food particles for delicate yet marvellously constructed organisms that couldn't possibly survive in the pounding surf of reality, where people ask questions like, "Is what you do of any use?"
The Science of Discworld.
Within their world, things really happen the way people think they do when they're not being completely scientific. So, for example, Discworld is flat, the sun goes round it. Our world looks like that at first, but by thinking about the whole thing in a scientific way, we have come to realise, and indeed, the ancient Greeks knew this, the world is not flat, it's round, and the reason the sun seems to be going round is actually because this planet is spinning.
The 3 rules of the librarians of space and time are 1. Silence, 2. Books must be returned no later than the date shown, and 3. Do not interfere with the nature of causality.
Guards, guards.
The heart of Einstein, the interesting things that are going on at the moment, are to do with the geometry of space-time, wormholes, black holes, white holes, wormholes, any kind of holes, and the way in which Einstein's physics appears to be entirely consistent with a kind of time travel and a kind of alternative universe.
Einstein's great contribution to science was the hairstyle. He actually did invent the mad scientist hairstyle, which actually really then started to get scientists on the map. People now realise they knew how to recognise scientists. So I think that was the big thing that Einstein gave to science, something that scientists could recognisably call their own. And of course there was all that stuff, about the speed of light and E equals mc squared, but the hairstyle I think was the important thing.
Ovin Harkadley, lecturer in law, once again found that the wizards around him were parting like morning mist. He waved his thin hands vaguely. "The world you see, that is the reality in which we live, in fact, can be thought of as, in a manner of speaking, a rubber sheet." The sentence was not going to appear in anyone's book of quotable quotes.
Sorcery.
Einstein had this idea of combining space and time together into one almost irreducible object, and he had this idea that an event is a point in space-time. A series of events, such as happens to a person, is a curve that runs through space-time. And from that point of view, the natural philosophy is to think that everything that ever happens in the universe is in some sense laid down from the beginning. In a sense, there isn't a beginning, there isn't an end, there isn't a now. All there is a tangle of world lines for different particles, different people, different whatever. And this geometry determines everything that happens to you.
The ambience is magic, so that metaphors can, to an extent, come to life. There is a very hard-to-find element called narrativium in the Discworld universe. Everything, in fact, is an alloy. Iron is an alloy of iron and narrativium. The narrativium part tells iron that it is iron, has been iron, and will continue to be iron so that it doesn't become cheese. That's why stories happen so readily on Discworld, because there are the story shapes created by the narrativium. It's a remarkably useful device, but you have to use it consistently. We definitely try to project narrativium on science we've had a lot of fun in the Science of Discworld 3 with Darwinism and how people view Darwinism. We view it as a narrative because we've all seen that illustration, which actually looks like me getting up in the morning. You have this shambling figure at one end, all hairy, and then at the other end you have nice 21st century Homo sapiens, and that's how it works, and that's how it was meant to be. And there were these blobs, and they swam about a bit, and they turned into lizards, and the lizards became bigger, and then they died because little furry creatures were eating their eggs, and the furry creatures got bigger, and then there was us, and then it stops. For most of us, that's how we understand science. It is the story of science.
It's a well-known, established fact that most really great discoveries are owed to one brief moment of inspiration. The sight of, say, a falling apple, or a boiling kettle, or the water slopping over the edge of a bath. The shape of DNA, it is popularly said, owes its discovery to the chance sighting of a spiral staircase, when the scientist's mind was just at the right receptive temperature. Had he used the lift, the whole science of genetics might have looked a good deal different.
Sorcery.
The whole of science on some level is a lie. The more you understand about a particular area, the more the experts will say to each other, well, of course, yeah, the textbooks all say that it works like this, but we all know that there were 6 experiments done by Bloggs in 1982 that didn't really fit. And for a long time, people have thought that was all nonsense, but they're beginning to think Bloggs was onto something, and it really is a bit of a puzzle. And at every level, I until recently taught undergraduate courses, and these are lies to undergraduates. These are a higher level of lie, but you can never tell the whole truth because it gets incredibly complicated. The world is very, very complex. We like to tell ourselves simple stories about it. The only way we can learn things if those stories are comprehensible, and you can't make them comprehensible by matching the complexity of the outside world. You have to simplify. That's the job of science, is to simplify.
There is absolutely nothing that I can invent that's more fantastic than the stuff I read about in the popular science books. I am an absolute sucker for them. I know that you can never keep up, and you end up with this strange kind of soup in your brain of half-understood things, and you buy another popular science book and you think, at last, this one is going to be the one that I absolutely really do understand. But I think there are lots and lots of people out there. I would say possibly the bulk of the readers of the popular science books are a bit like me. You're trying to string it all together in your head. You're trying to use narrativium. We want to think of it in terms of a line from the past into the future. And as they say on Discworld, we are trying to unravel the mighty infinite using a language which was designed to tell one another where the fresh fruit was. A few years back, when the comet, I believe it was Shoemaker-Levy, split up and all 6 bits of it crashed into Jupiter, the BBC did a little vox pop, and they went out in the street, and I remember them asking one elderly lady whether or not seeing that on the television had frightened her, and she said, oh no, that kind of thing happens in outer space. And yes, that was very funny, and also it was kind of tragic. We actually think that all this is normal, this studio, these fields, this countryside, and none of it is. Left to itself, if we turned up on Earth without humanity, it would be forests from pole to pole. Different. The trees would change, but nothing else. Everything about us is artificial, and it is a world we've made and a world we've tried to understand, and I'm very pleased that we're continuing to try to understand it. One thing I'm sure of is that we should never take anything as a given truth. There is only ever a better kind of lie.
Relatively Einstein featured Terry Pratchett and Ian Stewart, and the reader was Martin Hyder. The producer was Rami Tabar. Tomorrow, Einstein draws a few laughs from comedian Mark Steele and cartoonist Sidney Harris. Now, how many times as a child were you told to look at me when I'm talking to you? Well, new research has shown that looking away gives our brains more problem-solving capacity. So can avoiding eye contact help children to learn? Claudia Hammond will find out in All in the Mind at 4:30. While in a couple of minutes, Laurie Taylor abstains in Thinking Aloud.